Hi there, and welcome to another episode of Science Class. Today we are learning about the tropical rainforest biome. Tropical rainforest is the hottest and the wettest biome on Earth, and it's also hugely important for our survival. So let's learn a little bit about it today. So the word tropical means hot, right? The tropical areas are right around the equator of Earth. So the hottest areas on Earth are tropical. And of course, rain is wet, and a forest is full of trees. So a tropical rainforest is a hot, wet biome that is filled with trees. Sometimes you hear it called the jungle. So the Jungle Book takes place in the tropical rainforest. Jungle is just another word for the rainforest. So let's talk about some traits of the tropical rainforest. What makes a rainforest a rainforest? This week we've learned that forests are places that have lots of trees and lots of wildlife, right? Because they have lots of food and water. But what makes a rainforest different from a temperate forest? Well, the rainforest has the most rainfall of any biome on Earth. They also have high average temperatures, surprisingly poor soil quality, and the most biodiversity of any biome. So biodiversity, we remember that the prefix bio means life, and diversity means variety, right, or difference. So there's a lot of different living things, a lot of different organisms, and a variety of life in the rainforest. Millions of different species make their home here. So first, let's talk about rainfall. The rainforest gets over 100 inches of rain every year, compared to the desert, which only gets 10 inches of rain every year. That's quite a lot. And in some parts of the rainforest, they can get over 400 inches of rain. So that would be 40 times the amount of the rain in the desert. So it's a huge amount. Some people even say that it's practically always raining in the rainforest because as the water vapor is evaporating from the ground and also transpiring off the plant leaves, it's basically just hovering right over the top of the rainforest. There's almost a constant cloud cover or fog that's right over the top of the rainforest because there's so much moisture in the plants and in the air. And then the temperature. It is pretty much always warm in the rainforest, even in the winter and even at night. It stays a solid 70 to 90 degrees. So not too hot. It doesn't get as hot as the desert, and that's because there's just so much moisture in the air that it keeps it a little bit cooler. But it also doesn't get cold, right? So 70 degrees Fahrenheit is a pretty comfortable temperature, and then all the way up to 90 degrees. That's about the range that the rainforest will stay in. So it's really easy to survive in this temperature, and that's one of the reasons that there's so much life in the rainforest. There's also surprisingly pretty poor soil in the rainforest. This is a trait that's common amongst all rainforests. And you might think, well, Miss Miles, if there's poor soil, then how come there's so many things growing there? Good question. The soil in the rainforest doesn't get to hold on to most of its nutrients because of how much rain is going into it. So the constant rain is washing away a lot of these nutrients. Now, things that live in the rainforest are well adapted to this. So that means trees are able to soak up nutrients, not just from the soil, but from just the very surface layer of the forest floor, which is filled with, decomposing dead leaves and compost, which is really healthy and good for plants. So they're soaking up the nutrients quickly, and they're well adapted to get the nutrients, even though the soil is not really holding on to the nutrients. So things that live there are able to quickly soak up what they need. However, what this means is for farmers who are trying to cut down trees in the rainforest to make space for their crops and their fields, they are finding that it's not easy to grow things here. It's not easy to plant vegetables and crops in the soil, because the soil has just been washed out. It doesn't have enough nutrients because there's been too much rain. So even though native plants can grow here and grow well, farmers who are trying to chop down the native plants and plant things that don't belong there are finding that it's much more difficult than in other places. And then finally, biodiversity. So the rainforest is home to millions of different species, and we remember that the reason that a place like a forest can support all these different animals and all this different wildlife is because there's an abundance of food and water there, and shelter and space. And if there's food and water, then there's going to be other living things, right? So even though it's very dense and crowded in the rainforest, there's still plenty of food and plenty of water for all the creatures who live there. So there's lots of the rainforest that is still undiscovered, and there's probably hundreds of species who live there who we have never found or never seen. And species are evolving there all the time. But the rainforest is really cool because it's home to so much variety of life, so many different animals and so many different plants and different types of fungi. So it's a really amazing place, and kind of like the ocean, in a lot of ways, we know less about it than we think, just because it's so thick and so vast, and it's hard to explore all these areas. So there's a lot of it that has yet to be discovered, and maybe someday you will explore the rainforest and find new species or find out new things about this biome. Okie dokie, so pause your video. We're on question number 1. Tell me 3 traits of the tropical rainforest. We just went over 4 different traits that all rainforests have in common, so see if you can tell me 3 of them. Ready, go. Fantastic. So you could have told me that the rainforest has the most rainfall of all the biomes, or that it is the most biodiverse of all the biomes. Or you could have told me that the rainforest has pretty constant high temperatures, or that it has pretty poor soil quality. Another thing about the rainforest is that it goes through 2 seasons. So remember, the temperate forest goes through all 4 seasons, the 4 seasons that we are familiar with here in Colorado: spring, summer, fall, and winter, while the rainforest only goes through 2 seasons, the dry season and the wet season. So the dry season is similar to what we might think of as the summer, where it's a little hotter, it doesn't rain as much, and then the wet season obviously is where they get the majority of their rain in the rainforest, and that's kind of like what we might think of as the winter time. So in the Amazon rainforest, which is the biggest rainforest in the world down in South America, in Brazil, the Amazon rainforest, since it's in Brazil, is getting its rainy season from probably right now from December to May. So they're just getting towards the end of their rainy season down there. But just 2 seasons in the rainforest. And not only are there 2 seasons, but there also are 4 layers in the rainforest. Now, you remember that we've talked about layers with almost everything that we've learned in science, right? There's layers inside of an atom. There's layers inside the earth. There's layers of the atmosphere. There's layers of the ocean, right? We've learned all of these different layers, and we know that the earth likes patterns, right? The earth likes cycles, and it likes to repeat patterns. So even the rainforest has its layers. Starting at the bottom, we have the forest floor, so the darkest, deepest part of the forest. Then the understory, which is the lower parts of the trees. The canopy, which is the middle and some of the tops of the trees. And then finally, the emergent layer, which is the top of the trees all the way up into the clouds. So let's talk about each of these layers today, just a little bit. Again, similar to what I told you when we were learning about the ocean, there is so much detail and complexity in the rainforest that we could spend our entire lifetime studying it, and we would never learn everything that there is to learn about the rainforest. So for us to try to break it down and learn about the rainforest all in one day is kind of a big goal. So we're just going to focus on some of the main features of the rainforest. So some of the big traits of what makes a rainforest. And then I'm going to teach you what is in each of these 4 layers. Okay, so that's going to be our main focus today. There's so much more detail, but we'll try to keep it pretty basic. So here we go. We'll start with the forest floor. So the forest floor is the darkest, dampest, densest part of the forest. This is where there's not much sunlight. Hardly any sunlight reaches down here. It stays pretty moist and pretty soggy down here, mostly because they're not getting very much sunlight and because it's raining all the time. And it's the densest, so it's the most crowded with plant life and leaves. Very, very thick down on the forest floor. And there are a lot of dead things and also things that eat dead things down here on the floor. So dead plants, rotting logs that have fallen over, dead leaves from trees, and also dead bodies, of insects and animals who have perished in the forest. So decomposers like insects and worms and things like that are crawling all over the forest floor and eating and decomposing these dead things all the time. And that allows them to put nutrients back into the soil. So it's a great circle of life. So things that live on the forest floor are lots and lots of insects, bugs, things that eat insects and bugs, such as anteaters. And then you also have worms and different types of fungi and mushrooms. So mostly small things, creepy crawlies on the forest floor. All right, the second layer or the next layer is called the understory. So the understory, as you can see here, is kind of close to the forest floor, but it's really the bottoms of these trees. Okay, kind of the lowest section or the lowest layer of the trees. And down here, there's lots of shade, and it's kind of a leafy, sheltered layer. So it's very similar to the forest floor, just a little bit higher up and a little bit less crowded and a little bit less dark. So they're getting a little bit more sunlight than the forest floor, just barely. And because it's still pretty thick and dark and crowded in this layer, it's pretty quiet and it's good for hunting. So this is the layer where you're going to find creatures like jaguars or panthers, okay, silent hunters. Or you might find snakes like tree snakes and boas. And then you also have things like bats and different kinds of birds, frogs like poison dart frogs, lots of different insects. Insects live in every layer of the rainforest. They're all over the whole thing. But in this understory, it's a good place for sneaky creatures. And creatures, animals who don't need that much sunlight, because there's still lots of shade in this place. Okay, so pause your video. Question number 2 on your Google form or on your piece of paper, if that's how you're doing it. Question 2, how is the understory different from the forest floor? How is the understory different from the forest floor? Okay, and you can tell me a few different answers. Maybe you talk about the different creatures who live there, or the fact that the understory gets a little bit more light, or the fact that the understory is a little bit higher up in the trees and the forest floor is at the very bottom. All right, the third layer is called the canopy. We're getting close to the tops of the trees here, and we are at the tops of some of the smaller trees, but the canopy is really the second to the top. So not the tippy top, not the highest part of the rainforest, but pretty close. Okay, so we're about halfway up the trees in the canopy. So the canopy, it's close to the top, and it's really sunny and breezy up there. So we're starting to come out of the shade, starting to get more sunlight. It's probably a little bit louder up there, a little bit more air, a little bit more wind. Okay, there's more space, and this is the area where there is the most wildlife in the rainforest. Okay, so this is where you're going to find all of the, or a lot of the monkeys, the sloths, different types of snakes, and all sorts of birds like toucans live in the canopy. So this is a really colorful and loud and busy place where you're going to see all sorts of different creatures and see lots of activity and lots of commotion. Plants growing here and lots of animals living here, birds and monkeys making their nests. This is a very active layer of the rainforest. It's called the canopy. So pause your video. Let's answer question number 3. What kind of creatures live in the canopy? And you can just give me just a couple examples. Okay, and finally we're on the 4th layer, the topmost layer. It's called the emergent layer. So the very tops of the trees, that's the emergent layer. Let's first focus on this word emergent. Do you know what emergent means? Have you heard this word before, or maybe a word that sounds like it? Emergent comes from the Latin word emergere. Emergere, let me get it on the screen. There we go. Emergere or emergere. You might see the word emerge inside of here. So this Latin root, and you guys know I love to bring it down to what do the roots of the words mean? Because this helps us understand what we're talking about, right? So this word emergere, this Latin root, means to bring something into the light, to bring to light, or to rise up and out, right? So if you think of, for example, the word emergency, when you have an emergency, that's when you have to rise up and out. You have to rise up right away, right? And rise to action in an emergency. Or maybe if there's an emergency, it's something that you have to bring to light, right? You have to shed light on it so that action can be taken right away. So emergent means to bring to light or to rise up and out. So the emergent layer of the rainforest is the layer that's reaching into the sunlight, right? This is the layer that rises up and out of the trees and into the atmosphere, into the clouds, and into the sun. The emergent layer is the tallest layer. It's the tops of the trees. And this is where there's the most sunlight. It's really windy and noisy up here. Lots of space, lots of open air. And to live in this place, in this layer, you have to have pretty good balance. Or you have to have wings. Because as you can imagine, those tops of the trees are not just standing still, right? They're bending and swaying, and there's pretty much constant movement up in this layer. So the animals who can live in a place like this are usually birds who are flying from branch to branch, and also some different types of monkeys who are really agile with good balance. And then also all sorts of types of insects, like butterflies, love to live up in this layer where there's space and sunlight and plenty of sky. Okay, so last question on your Google form. Go ahead and pause your video and let's answer question number 4. What does the word emergent mean? What does emergent mean? So emergent means to come up out of something, right? To rise up and out. That's emerging. So the emergent layer is the layer that rises up and out into the sunshine and into the sky. Alrighty, awesome. So let's review really quickly what we learned today about the hottest, wettest biome on Earth, the tropical rainforest. We learned that it has the most rainfall of any biome, that it has a high average temperature, so it's always wet and hot here, that has poor soil quality due to the amount of rain, so the nutrients are always getting washed out of the soil. And finally, it has the most biodiversity, and the most variety of life out of all of the ecosystems on Earth. We also learned that the rainforest has 2 seasons, a dry season and a wet season, and 4 layers. From bottom to top, they go the forest floor, the understory, the canopy, and the emergent layer. Alrighty, that's all for today. I hope you enjoyed learning a little bit about the rainforest. Like I said, there is just way too much detail to possibly cover in one day, but hopefully you have a good understanding at least of how the rainforest is structured and some common traits of the rainforest. That is all for today. So at this point, you are ready to take your DOL and then get started on your LSAE work. As always, let me know if you have any questions, and I will talk to you later. Thank you. Bye.